In this video, I'm going to talk about this car, who is owned by a very important man in the Porsche world, Alois Ruf, the founder, the owner of the tuning and restoration company Ruf. But this car is not a 911. This is actually the predecessor of the 911, the 901, one of, I think, only 2 prototypes left in existence, also known as Quickplow. So that's what we're going to do. He's going to arrive in 5 minutes, and we're going to have a chat about what makes this different to a 911 and a bit about him, because I've never actually met him. I'm Jonny Smith. Welcome to the Late Break Show. This interview took place at the Rennsport reunion event in California at the end of 2023. It was at this same event that I got to drive the first Porsche badged car ever. And if you haven't watched that video yet on the Late Break Show, there's a link on the screen right now. Alois, it's really, really lovely to have a bit of your time at this event. I know you probably get mobbed at these sorts of events.
There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot going on. There's cars on track, there's people wanting to chat to you all around, but I wanted to have a conversation with you because obviously you're the founder of Ruf.
Well, actually it was my father. In 1939, I'm the second generation.
Yeah.
But anything that has to do with these cars, that is about me when I was a teenager. I got involved already.
So you made it Porsche. It wasn't so Porsche before.
It wasn't Porsche before. It all started in 1963, 60 years ago.
Right.
Well, we didn't drive a 901 yet because the cars were not available.
Yeah.
But the first Porsche that came to our life was a 356.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is how everything started, and that was actually not only a coincidence, it was an accident. And literally an accident, because my father had also a tour bus at that time, and he was driving his tour bus, and he was overtaken by a Porsche 356, and the driver in this maneuver lost control over his car and ended up in the ditch.
Right.
And rolled the car. My father stopped, looked after the driver, comforted him, brought him to the hospital to have him checked out. Everything was good. Said, don't worry about your car, I will tow it home and then we talk. And he ended up buying the damaged car.
So that was the first
Porsche.
The first Ruf Porsche experience.
The first Ruf Porsche experience. We fell in love with this car. You know, the company at that time was 15 years old, Porsche. You know, it was a very young company.
Yeah.
But the 356s, which at that time they were not called 356, they were just called a Porsche.
Yeah.
And it was just an incredible new experience. To drive this car. My father called it the Weasel because it was so nimble and so light, easy to maneuver.
Yeah.
We fell in love with driving that car, and I was 13 years. He allowed me to drive it too sometimes.
Oh, really?
In the nighttime, yes, undercover.
Yeah.
And I also fell in love with that car. I was totally fascinated. And then when we sold that car a year later, it was such an experience again, like we never had before. We had a young man knocking at the window in the middle of the street in Munich. He said, I want to buy your car. And he came up with the cash on a Sunday afternoon and bought the car from us. And my dad said, I've never made a car sale like that. And so we came to the conclusion, all these Porsche guys must be crazy.
Yeah.
And thank God they are, and they still are.
So then,
look what's happening here and what we are doing.
So Ruf does. I mean, as a young kid, I learned about Ruf, and I love your jacket, by the way. It says
Thank you.
with the Yellowbird.
Yeah.
And that was in the 80s, of course,
sure,
wasn't it?
Sure.
No, and that's become an absolute legend of a vehicle.
Yeah.
Ruf became a household name amongst car perverts when in the late 80s the twin-turbo CTR Yellowbird was filmed on a certain German toll road flexing what we learnt was nearly 500 horsepower. This 1100 kilo wasp-coloured thing could do 100 miles an hour in 6.7 seconds and 211 miles an hour, making it faster than Porsche's 959, Ferrari's F40 and the Lambo Diablo. It was christened the world's fastest car. Better still, it was showcased by a helmsman, Stefan Rosa, wearing those slip-on shoes and those socks. For sure, it was the fascination on the Nürburgring.
But the car I wanted to talk to you about here is
this one here,
because of course it's the 60th anniversary of the 911, but this is not a 911.
It's a 901 prototype.
Yeah.
And the story is of this car that my father found this car in 1968 at the Porsche dealership in Stuttgart, Fellbach. and it was sitting there with a damaged rear end and a missing engine.
Right.
And he said that could be the perfect start for my son to build his first Porsche. And he brought it home. That was the beginning. And then in the winter of 68 to spring of 69,
Yeah.
we restored it, fixed it.
Yeah.
And my dad said, "You're not getting a 911 engine. This is too dangerous for at that time 19-year-old."
Yeah.
And we put in a 912 engine, and I was grateful and happy to have this car with
So,
the 912 propulsion.
So you helped to rebuild it 68, 69, and
Right.
how old were you then?
I was 18.
Okay.
It was in the year when I turned to 19.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the color at that time, you know, typical for a young kid.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a blue metallic that was more en vogue.
Yeah.
That was the latest Porsche color.
Yeah.
And I wanted to dress it up as a 911S.
Of course.
Which I did, you know.
Yeah.
Made everything from the 68 model year and 69 model year to bring it into the car, you know. And I drove it for 2 years until 71. And loved it. Was a great time in my life. I always realized that few things were so special and so different that it must have been some kind of a trial fit car, but I didn't understand what a prototype was. I was too young for that. I didn't know what a prototype was.
Right, so and your father
Yeah,
didn't know it
yeah.
was a prototype?
No, either. We said it's something special. They must have experimented with this car.
Yeah.
That's all we thought. And also it had a funny chassis number, like a 356 chassis number with 5 digits.
Right.
And but that didn't matter. There was not much to talk about that. We just enjoyed it as a quasi 911. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And drove it until 71, and then I wanted to sell it to a young man, and he wrecked it on the test drive.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow,
And then since
okay.
1971, the car was always put aside and kept in storage because I knew it was something special that I would not give up. And I am, as a person, very difficult throwing away anything.
Are you a hoarder?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But thank God, maybe in this case.
So how long has that had this sat wrecked?
We took it out, or let's put it this way. I told my wife about this car, and in the 1980s, I learned more about the whole evolution story, how the 901 came about, how the 911 came about, and the first prototypes. Then I learned that this car had the nickname Quick Blue.
Yeah.
And I was so excited because it was Ferdinand Piech. It was his first test car that he drove at Porsche.
That is incredible.
And the first one that was actually running with the engine that we all know today.
Yeah.
And then later it became Hans Metzger's car. And I talked to Hans Metzger. I said, I have your old car. One day I have to restore it.
Yeah.
We talked about it many times, but it has never happened. But
So the engine had gone. So do you think they sold the car without the motor?
Yes, because the last owner of the car was a Mr. Vetter.
Yeah.
He was the owner after after Metzger, and he was the owner of a bus coach building company in
Yeah.
Stuttgart. Vetter buses were quite well known, and he had the accident at the Hockenheim racetrack. He was on a track day.
Yeah.
And this is how he lost the control over the car, and it ended up this way. And about 15 years ago, by accident again, I found out about a motor that was available because a house manager of a school called me,
Yeah.
facility manager, and he said, I have an old Porsche engine in the basement, and I have read about you that you are restoring older Porsches also. I'm supposed to give it to the scrap. And I thought I'd give you a call first, maybe you would need that engine. Then I said, for sure, and I drove there.
Yeah.
And I found out it was number 22, a very early engine that was given to the school for the students to study the
For mechanical
911.
learning and mechanical
For learning.
My God. So
And then
that's
after
number 26, did you say?
No, 22 is
22.
the engine. Yeah.
And the car is number?
Number 6.
Yeah.
But it had many engines. The first engine that was in this car was a wooden mock-up engine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was presented the first time in London, interesting for your crowd,
Yeah.
at Earl's Court, on 12th of October of 1963.
Yeah.
And it was there with a wooden mock-up engine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I cannot believe the backstory to this car.
Yeah. And then afterwards, it was brought to Geneva in March of '64. Still had the wooden mock-up engine. And then it came back to the factory.
Yeah.
And then it was prepared to become a runner, a driver.
Goodness.
Yeah, and the
So-
real engine came in.
Could you show us around the sort of the main differences between the production 911,
Sure.
and I know there's an early one over there that you've worked on.
Very important to see that car as well, because that is car number 7.
Yeah.
This is car number 6. They were probably built side by side in the prototype shop.
Yeah.
And at that time there was a lot of discussion about which dashboard is the correct dashboard for the future.
Yeah.
And if you have looked at that car, you saw it has 2 big instruments.
Yeah.
And that was what we call the Graf Goertz dashboard. Graf Goertz was a designer at BMW.
Yeah.
He was famous for the 507 that he
Okay.
did.
Yeah.
And he brought his instruments and brought them to Porsche, the big 2 BMW instruments.
Right.
They never fitted for this car actually, because this car needed something more Porsche.
Yeah.
And so Butzi Porsche turned around and said, no, we have to make a change to the dashboard. And he wanted to have a curved shape of the dashboard where the instruments look at the driver.
Yeah, so that sort of concave 5.
Exactly. And this is what happened. And in Earl's Court, this car was shown with the new instruments, with the new dashboard.
Fantastic.
Yeah. While in Frankfurt, a month before in September, with the launch of the 901, it still had the old Graf Goertz 2-instrument dash.
I mean, it's like you were destined to work on Porsches forever.
Yeah.
If this was your first car.
Yeah, but the significance and importance of this vehicle, I learned later.
Yeah.
I learned that 20 years later.
Yeah, it was just an accident damage.
Yeah,
911.
yes.
So, to people watching this who know, clearly it looks like a 911.
Yeah,
Clearly
sure.
there's lots of familiarity,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
what are the main key differences?
Have the camera look at the dashboard and you see that there's no provision for a speaker on the upper part of the padding.
Ah, yeah.
In this area. No
Yeah.
provision for the speaker. And then it was the first one with a mahogany trim for the wood, because wood was not used before at Porsche.
Yeah.
And the back of the dashboard was painted with a crinkle finish,
Yeah.
like Italian sports cars.
Like the cam covers and the stuff.
Or like cam covers.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was never used later, but it was only in this prototype. And when you look at the air control here, this is the 356 piece. The air
Right,
controller, was
yeah.
never used in a production car.
Right.
And the bezels of the instruments were the small chrome rings of the 356.
Yes.
And the time clock had 12 numbers, which they never had in the production cars, always 4 numbers.
Oh, was it just 1, 3, 6? Oh,
exactly,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
And another interesting detail is the 4-spoke steering wheel. This was the first car where they showed the 4-spoke steering wheel with a wood. And the steering wheel idea came probably, most likely, from Graf Goertz, who came from BMW, because the 4-spoke steering wheel was also used at BMW when you look at the 507.
Yeah.
So that was a very, very beautiful detail for the 911 and for all the production years until the steering wheel was used, which was up to 1973.
Yeah. It is elegant.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of, I presume you've got photographic documentation of the restoration.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And
yeah.
how long did it take to restore this?
We started the restoration in 19 and finished it in 22.
Okay.
And my goal was to have it in 23 and show it in 23 to the public for the 60th birthday. There we go.
And here we are.
It happened in August this year.
Yeah.
And we showed it in Pebble Beach, and it won 2 prizes. I mean, all the prizes you can win in Pebble Beach. And another detail I want to show you. Maybe you remember the early 911 had a push button here to open.
Yeah.
And here it has a rocker
Oh.
to open the door. You will see that also on the red car when you look at it. It's
Yeah.
the same. And it was missing a grab handle for the passenger.
Yeah.
And there was an internal complaint. It was written or documented in a paper. And then they put in the 356 grab handle here.
Right.
You will see the same on Barbarossa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's-
So there are many details, other details. When you look at the engine compartment, the 911s always had those so-called liftomats, the gas springs to hold the lid up.
Yeah.
Here it was a regular spring, see?
Oh, okay. With just a
Just a
cover,
regular spring,
plastic
yes.
cover.
And then they were experimenting with different types of air filter housings. I have the trumpets up here horizontally, left and right.
Yeah.
When you look at Barbarossa, they come out down here, the trumpets. So each car was a bit different.
So Barbarossa was only one after this or one before this?
For the number, it's one higher.
Okay.
But they were at that time probably working both of the cars at the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the big discussion was inside the company what kind of a dashboard will we use?
Yeah.
And that was the winner.
Yeah.
You know? And then at the beginning, when it was in Earl's Court, there was a wooden mock-up engine in the car. And in Geneva as well, yeah.
Do you know where the wooden engine's gone?
I wish I had it. That would be great. But I'm sure that has been thrown away.
It's amazing that you found a prototype
engine
flat six that was going to be scrapped.
Well, that was the beginning for my mindset. I said, okay, now we have the starting point to restore this car.
Yeah.
Because now I have the right engine for this car, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there were many engines in this car. Every week another one probably to try out, you know?
Absolutely.
So this is not a case about matching numbers, you know?
No, no. Well, like you say, it was a guinea pig.
Yeah.
So
from the outside, there are a couple little remarkable parts as well. When you look at the vent here, it's made in plexiglass.
Ah.
Yeah, made in plexiglass, and the opener here for the vent is a completely hand-carved piece. Has never been in the production cars.
So not 356?
No, not
right.
356, not 911. And the rear windows were also fixed glass. You couldn't open the side window.
Right, okay.
When the production cars, you could open the side windows.
Yeah.
And another interesting feature is, which I would like to show you and point out, that there was a little seam going around from the front bumper.
Yeah,
you see this little seam?
Lid. Yeah.
It goes all the way around, here even in the front fender, and the rear fender, the quarter panel,
Yeah.
and all the way in the back. And you look at all the details.
And so that's 901 only.
Only prototype.
Wow.
When you look at Barbarossa, you will find it in the back. It's also there, yeah.
So when you restored this, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, most of the panels will fit.
Yeah,
But those little changes you had
so
to...
we had to make many pieces by hand. And when you look in the front bumper, no openings for fog lamps.
Of course.
See?
So that wasn't thought of yet.
Yeah, was not thought of yet, yes. And when it was shown in London, and you will look up the photo that exists from the Earl's Court, it had no bumperettes. But in Geneva, it had the bumperettes. They were invented in between, you know. These are all the little remarkable
That is
details.
amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you've given us the time to show around all these details because, you know, a lot of the cars that are here today owe a lot to this, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, without this, all these cars going around the track.
It's the DNA and base.
Yeah.
The roots.
So clearly you're going to keep this car forever.
Of course.
You've had it since you were a teenager.
I was a teenager when I started driving this. I have some photos when I can show you what it looked like. Here, this is Geneva, see? The 904 was the star.
Yeah.
The 356s were production.
Yeah.
And they sort of subliminally showed the 901.
Yeah.
And that also, this picture expresses how insecure and unsure they were that this car will be a success.
It's funny, isn't it? It's a bit like when they were Volkswagen phasing the Beetle out and trying to find the solution, you know, with the Golf and all the predecessors.
That is so true. There's another interesting part I would like to show you. When Automotive and Sport made the first story and driving test of the 901, they used the car with the old dashboard. This was car number 5.
Yeah.
Look, and they blacked out the dashboard here, you see, so you cannot see it.
Right.
And they took my car, that was not a driver at that time, and put the pictures of my car, and they blacked out here, and inserted it, you know.
Yeah.
This is what the interior looks like. When you look closer, you see there's a 356, so it's in the factory where the picture was taken. And so they had to match a few things at that time.
That is amazing.
To fix it for Automotive and Sport. That was the first time that was written about the car, you know, this issue here.
It's weird, isn't it, to think that they were worried that this might not be a success, because now we know how...
From today's perspective, but, you know, when you think of Porsche being such a young company at that time, one very successful car with such a strong sales success story. The 356, it went through evolution stages, and it was selling so well, and then suddenly here comes a car that is entirely new.
Yeah.
And they just didn't believe in it. They thought people would not accept it.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's
and now
bizarre.
it's the most successful sports car ever built.
Yeah.
Ever built, you
Yeah.
know. Now, this was my car with a 912 engine. If you want to have a quick look. All these pictures come from an 8mm film, from a movie film, because we didn't make stills at that time.
Oh, really?
Everything I have is only from 8mm.
Like cine
film.
camera type.
Yeah, cine camera type, exactly. Yeah. This is what it looked like.
This is what you looked when you were driving it around.
When I was driving it at that time.
Did you put fogs in it?
Fogs in it, everything, you
Yeah.
know. Modernized it.
Of course. Because
That's what a kid wants.
it's exactly what our kids want. That is cool. Well, I'll let you get on because
Sure.
I know you're busy.
Okay.
And we're going to take a couple more shots of the car. We
right.
might take a couple more shots.
Sure,
of the
you
boat.
can, absolutely.
But that's
Yeah.
really, really kind.
Good.
Thank you so much, Alois.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank
All
you.
right, Take
All
care.
right.